Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Yapping with Yucca podcast. I'm your host, Sophia, today, and we're here with two amazing guests. We have Savanna and Siihasin. I'll pass it to Savanna to introduce herself.
Hey everybody, I'm Savanna. I use she, her pronouns. I am a Yucca Steering Committee member. I joined about a year ago as a intern and now I'm working with them, which is super awesome. And yeah, I'll pass it to Susan.
Hi, Yat A. My name is Siihasin. I always like to introduce myself in my language, so I'll start there. She'e Siihasin Nazba Yenin Shetwarichini Nishle Nakai Bashishin Nde Dashichi Nakai Dashnale Akot Ego Nagle Nabahinishle. Ado to Hanakade do Tiwa territories de Nasha.
Thanks so much for being here. So we are here today to talk about Black Mesa and the resistance that's going on there. So we're going to ask you a little about the history of what's happening there and how folks can get involved now to support. Um, so the first question is just kind of generally tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do, your role in the movement, and kind of what got you here.
My name is Siihasin. I also go by Hope. And those are the names that I have gone by in community. I've been a community organizer for 10 plus years. I started organizing here in southern Tiwa Pueblo lands when I lived on the streets. My family, we are relocatees. We were forcefully relocated in the early to mid 80s, late 70s. Um, Due to the Peabody coal mine in a region that is known as Black Mesa region and Beg Mountain region, where we had a extractive industry by the name of Peabody Coal seek to extract coal from underneath us. And so my family was one of the first families to be relocated. The barbed wire fence that was put between the two tribal communities, Navajo Nation and Hopi Pueblo, went in the middle of our living room. So our home was bulldozed in within 30 days that barbed wire fence had been created. And that's where my family is originally from. But we've been relocating, so we've been struggling in border towns and across the reservation for the past 3 generations since relocation. I'm very blessed that I come from a family of medicine people who are really connected to our territories and to our community. So, despite relocation, we have maintained a lot of close ties and relationships with our relatives across our region. What's known as Jedito, we're between like Jedito, Low Mountain. If you know anything about the Navajo Nation res, you'll know that we're about the size of Rhode Island. We're a huge reservation, and Black Mesa in particular is a very unique space because the region itself consists of several communities. There's an actual like Black Mesa. I know that there's also several Black Mesas and other Pueblo communities. So it's always really trying to talk about land in a way that brings in the community because we all share names because most of our names just reflect the way that the land looks.
Mhm.
So that's a little bit about me and my family. That's where I'm from. I'm a land defender. I'm a water protector. I also identify as a revolutionary and a Diné communist. And I have done a lot of work in my years of organizing, as well as when I in my undergrad at the University of New Mexico, and really educating myself about my people's history, the history of the land, the history of extraction here across so-called New Mexico. And these are some of the things that I've done to really bring myself to this work. I am very blessed that growing up, my medicine people played a huge role in my upbringing, and that's really helped me with having firm boundaries around my values and principles in this line of work. And so I'm very proud to say I'm grassroots and that I organize with GNU Collective that is based out of Minnesota. And we come from a grassroots background, frontline spaces, pipeline spaces. We were fighting the Line 3 pipeline out in Minnesota, and that's where that collective was created, was to provide a space for Indigenous Two Spirit, women, femme, thems, and relatives that are in proximity to our struggle, or share our struggles against colonialism. we had created our collective to help fight this pipeline. And so that's the work that I do, and the people that I work with oftentimes are frontliners, are directly impacted, are grassroots, people who are living off of their homelands, people who are fighting for their right to live, oftentimes in spaces where there's limited resources and limited access to resources. So this is something that is very dear to my heart. It's very close to my struggles as a person who grew up on the streets, but also who has been reconnecting almost my entire life because of relocation. Um, and I feel really honored to be able to represent my people, and to bring some of my people who oftentimes get forgotten because of the way that colonialism has impacted Native people's lives, especially those of us who were forced out of our lands. I oftentimes will say, like, I'm like a refugee in Pueblo territories because I my people are struggling, and we're not we don't really have like the quality of life that we deserve. Um, and that's something that I think is really important to name. It's not our fault. It's really the systems around us that have created the conditions of displacement and struggle, and um, other forms of violences that impact us. And I think that's something that we need to be really intentional and critical about unpacking, because it's easy to it's or even around extractive industries and relocation, it's really easy to only talk about one specific narrative, and it's very complicated. And without an analysis around like US imperialism and colonialism and how these bigger systems and structures play into the displacement and the violences that everyday people experience, we're missing the picture. And so it's important that people are aware that there's context, there's history, um there's a lot to learn and a lot to be said and analyzed and critiqued. I'll pause there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah. What would you say to people who might be intimidated by those big words like imperialism and like systems and all these things that impact the conditions of Indigenous people and all of us here in the US? What would you recommend to people who are super interested in what you're saying but might not know where to start?
Hmm. I would say there's no shame in learning and getting educated. I'm a first generation high school graduate on my paternal side of my family, and a first generation college grad on my maternal side. And so I struggle often with finding terminologies and finding ways to explain some of these systems in a way that is accessible to my family. And it's something that is always a struggle. And I'm very, very blessed to have supportive relatives who are always challenging me to be the best version of myself I can. So I would say, just meeting people where they're at. And that includes like yourself, like knowing where you're at and knowing like where you might need to grow. Um, Something that I have heard, like a critique that actually I had heard recently, was a conversation around elitism. And I wanna challenge the way that people talk about elitism, especially when we're talking about revolution and revolutionary practices. So, as I had shared, I'm a revolutionary. I think that it's really important that those of us who are in community, who are able to articulate our struggles and the struggles of our people, um, by any means necessary, that we are able to use all of the tools around us, including language, as a way to talk about our history and our struggles, and the resistance that we are trying to cultivate and build. I would say for people who want to get involved and engaged, keep trying, keep showing up. The biggest thing you can do is show up. You don't have to know what colonialism is, or imperialism, or capitalism, but as long as you're working towards understanding what those systems are and how they impact you and the people around you, I think that's important, and that's like what we need.
Mhm.
Um, and so just really encouraging folks to get involved and get engaged and being able to use those terms. When I lived on the streets, I felt really salty or bitter. I felt really bitter because I'm Bitterwater Clan. I felt really bitter about like trying to articulate like my family's history, and at Huelde, for example, at the Navajo Long Walk in the concentration camp, like how that impacted my family. I really struggled with how to talk about those histories. And something that really stuck with me, was this quote, and I can't remember exactly who's like if this is exactly how it was, but she had said that if we don't talk about our struggles and our narratives and our histories, then the oppressor will write about it and say that we enjoyed it.
Mm.
And we'll say that like there was no resistance. And for me, that's always stuck with me, and it's always pushed me to be able to talk about these systems in a way that I can be at any table in any space in any building out on the land, and we're going to talk about colonialism.
Mhm.
We're going to talk about these systems because they impact us. And if we're not, like, it's just a missed opportunity if we're not making those connections, because being able to talk about imperialism, colonialism, and capitalism is really important, because that's how we are able to bridge our struggles internationally to indigenous people all over the world who are struggling. Because the reality is we have the same oppressors and colonizers. And I also, like, going back to this term elitism, I really think that it's important for people to understand that the global majority, which a lot of people would reference as like the third world, but the global majority of people around the world are engaging with this rhetoric. They're engaging with these politics. They're taking them up with no access to resources, no running water, no electricity, like just access to books about Lenin or Marx, and even then, very limited access. And it's been such a beautiful experience as a land defender to travel and meet water protectors, fighting for their rights for their water all over the world. And we'll sit here and we will have a dialogue about dialectical materialisms and Karl Marx. And it's interesting because like I have a lot more conversations that are politically aligned towards like revolutionary rhetoric outside of the United States, in places where people struggle with access to so much. And here within the belly of the beast, like it's very limited that I have any of these conversations, and it breaks my heart. And I really hope that more people will engage with it. It's not supposed to be a tool that we weaponize against each other or put each other down with. Like, language is supposed to be a tool used to connect and to bridge and to bring people together. And I think that's something that is really important, and I hope that we can continue to cultivate that as a community. And so I think as long as people just show up and be ready to learn, like that's how we all start. It's uncomfortable, it's awkward, but the more the merrier. We need help.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's so important. I think, like, when we talk about, like, climate justice work too, and, like, how our organization got started was, like, young people were like, "I'm so scared for the future,"
Mm,
and we start looking into, like, why is climate change happening, who's causing it? Like, those are the systems that are causing it. It is capitalism, it is colonialism, and if we don't think about that and we're like, "Oh, I just wanna save the earth," like, you can't do that without deconstructing these systems, so, yeah, that's so important.
exactly.
Yeah.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, would you mind telling us a little bit about the conditions of the
Mm,
people in Black Mesa and just the people living there so we can kind of humanize this issue and,
mm,
yeah, just get a little bit more context around land protection and the struggle up there?
mm. Okay, so I shared a little bit about the history of the land. Something I want to name is the land around Black Mesa and in that region is very complicated. And the reason why it's really complicated is because there is a system that is being projected and forced upon people who have coexisted since time immemorial. So Diné people and Hopi Pueblo people we've been here. We've always coexisted. We've helped each other historically, fighting against colonizers and oppressors. And it was really unfortunate to see uh, the way that the United Snakes, which U.S. Empire extractive industries, Peabody in particular, drive a wedge between indigenous peoples. And the way that they were able to do that was by creating a border, asking the tribal communities, well, whose land is who? And it's like, we've always lived together. But because of the way that Western systems create borders and create like cages, they forced us to identify which land is what. And so through that process, it created a territory between our communities, what we acknowledge as HPL and NPL, Navajo partition land and Hopi partition land, which are two areas that are um, regions of Black Mesa region where it's like blurred lines, right? Where you have Diné people who are living on Hopi land and Hopi people living on Diné land, whatever that means, because historically, like, most of us are related to each other. So it's like, I don't know how you can tear apart a family, but the United Snakes attempted. So You have a lot of elders who are living in spaces where they are actively resisting relocation. And when I say actively resisting relocation, I mean they are actively resisting. Their mission, their goal is to occupy their land so that they don't get moved off of it. Because I believe over 18,000 Dene people have been relocated. Um, I'm not familiar with the statistics on the Hopi side, but I know that a large amount of people have been relocated and moved out into border towns in different spaces. So a lot of the people who are still actively resisting are elders. Many of them who do not speak English, who do not, participate in Western systems or practices. Some of them don't drive. Um, a lot of them are living the traditional Dene way of life that they were taught by the generation before them. A lot of them are herbalists. A lot of them are farmers. A lot of them are knowledge keepers. A lot of them are older than 70 years old. And they're the heart of our people. They really are. I'm really blessed to be in relation to two Dene elders by the name of Selena Begay and Glenna Begay, who are my grandmas, who are very, very powerful, powerful Dene elders. And I am just so grateful and thankful to be like close to them and to be a part of the family. It's it's been heartbreaking to learn the histories of so many of my relatives throughout that region. And the reason I wanted to bring them up as knowledge keepers is that one thing that a lot of people don't know is there are a lot of Dene people out there who are like the cultural knowledge keepers of our community. Like some of these folks have never been impacted by some of the levels of colonialism compared to some other Dene people in other regions of the reservation. So like the Dene elders that I referenced, for example, their family never went through the Navajo Long Walk. Like they hid in the canyons. The canyons protected them. They knew how to navigate those spaces, and those canyons are still protecting us to this day. That is why those elders are still resisting, and it's really important for people to understand that there's like complicated layers of colonialism and how that's affected our communities historically. But a lot of those systems have not impacted our relatives who are deep within the canyons. And it's so important that we protect them. And it's so important that we are critical of the ways that the Western systems around us, um, for example, like romanticize our struggles of resistance because it is a struggle. It's really like a balancing act because you want people to come out and support the elders, but you also want the elders to have their autonomy and to not be exploited by people who want to maybe get involved in movement or just wanting to like feel like they belong, which it's like that's beautiful, but there's like ways to navigate how we are engaging in struggle in a way that needs to be disciplined and needs to be critical. So a lot of the elders out there are struggling. A lot of them don't have access to like grocery stores, for example. You don't really have access to a grocery store, maybe an hour in each direction. Um, in some regions, there's everybody is hauling water. There is no running water in most of the spaces across Black Mesa region. And actually, that's how you can tell, right? That's how you can tell that you have Hopi partition land and Navajo partition land, which is like the relocatee area they're trying to get people relocated from out of. Um, and then like the res, because the res, you'll see it lit up. There's like, they have lights. And then on the other side, it's pitch black because there's no lights. And that's very intentional. And I think that that's really important. That's part of this process of colonizing, this process of colonialism, is that they want to restrict access to resources so that those elders and those families would move out, right? That's the intention. And for me, like it's been helpful to be able to identify that that's the specific tool of colonization by learning from other like communities outside of the United States, like Cuba, for example, and the liberation of Cuba and that the United States has placed a blockade on them to be able to chokehold their access to resources to force them to obey the United States. And it's the same thing that the U.S. does with tribal communities. They make accessible resources difficult so that we are willing to collaborate and work with our colonizers. And I think that's very strategic. And so I'm really critical of how we cannot replicate that as we're engaging with our communities and people. So some of my elders, a lot of them, again, because they don't have access to a lot of resources, they live a traditional Diné like way of life. They're sheep herders, they're farmers, they're folks who are living off of the land sustainably, utilizing any of the elements around, just because that's what's accessible. If you know about Diné communities, you'd know that like we build hogans. Hogans are traditional earth dwellings, living dwellings, and we're very traditional people. I actually prefer to say we're very cultural people, very culturally disciplined people. And this is really important for me to say because this way of life aligns with the ways that my people are resisting. And it is very much an act of resistance for my elders to not speak English and to continue to practice our traditional, our cultural ways of living. I have come to really appreciate the ways that my grandmas will challenge us to talk about, some of these systems. Like when I talk about communism, for example, one of the ways that I'll talk about communism with my elders is by talking about how we trade food and how we trade medicine, and especially how we are not people who really put a lot of value into money. We put a lot of value into life. And we even have like protocols and systems and beliefs that really discourage commodifying life. And that's something that I really, really appreciate. And as like a communist, I learned that I was a communist by traveling to places like Palestine, like Cuba, to Ecuador, to Zapatista liberated territories. Like I've learned from indigenous peoples who practice these systems to see that my people actually uplift some of these values, and we share some of these principles and values with the global majority around the world. And so again, like language is a tool, right? So like I might say communist when I'm talking about this in English, but when I'm talking to my relatives, I might reference like and other values like hojon, like systems and values, laws even that Diné people practice that encourage us to remember who we are as Diné and that we value people. Bela Shla'i. Everybody is a five-fingered being and they're sacred and they should be respected as a Bela Shla'i. And that's something that's like again more cultural values and protocols, but western systems and colonialism tries to strip us from that. And so that's those are like the conditions of my people. It definitely is a different world, and there's a lot of struggle, and I don't want people to romanticize that struggle. I want people to understand like it's very intentional, and we have to be really intentional about how we engage with the community so that we are not actively harming or perpetuating more harm. Or what I like to say, extractivism, having extractive relationships with people.
Yeah, thank you. Real quick, can you talk about the difference between extractivism and extraction?
Yes. Okay, so systems of extraction. I feel like extraction is that term in particular is a broader system to talk about corporations or systems that are actively colonizing and stealing or appropriating, um and I would even say like tokenizing specific communities or specific struggles. So when I think of extraction, I think of like a pipeline. I think of like um a rig. I think of laws that support Native people being taken from their communities. Like, I think of these systems that are embedded in the structures around us that we are forced to engage in when I think about extraction. And that's a little different than extractivism because I look at extractivism as a mentality and as a way of being, as a practice, not just on an individual level, because I think a lot of people can participate in extractivism, but for me, I have come to talk about extractivism, especially in reference to Black Mesa, in the ways that some of our supporters or comrades or relatives show up. And this is specifically to people who are guests, who are non-Diné, who come out to Black Mesa to support. I'm really critical of the ways that people will come and siphon knowledge, or learn from my people and or make money off of my people and our struggle or knowledge of our struggle. And those are the ways that for me extractivism is really, really like in my face because I see my elders that are struggling every single day, getting up at 4 or 5 a.m. to sheep herd their sheeps, going and collecting plants to make meals, like just hardworking people who are just living that way, and they don't ask for, visibility. They don't ask for support. They're very, very proud people and strong and resilient. And to see people who are coming into these spaces just kind of like taking and taking and taking, it's really hard. It's really hard to see, and it makes me really protective. And so it's kind of manifested into this process of like I want to do political education to talk about like how is this extractive? Because in Diné culture we have specific protocols for how you even access knowledge, right? You don't ever just take. In our community, there's always a give and a take. There's always balance. And that's like a principle we value a lot. And
Mhm.
it's something that I like to bring into the conversation when I talk about extractivism is when you are extracting, when you are asking for something or when you want something, sometimes you don't even realize it. Like you're not conscious that you have this bias or have this inclination to be like, oh, well, they're going to take care of me. And it's like, that's labor that you're putting on somebody else to do. And if you're coming out to Black Mesa, especially for our wood camp or our sheep camp, I ask that you be completely self-sustainable. Meaning like you can go in for 2 weeks and you have everything you need with you. Water, food, and you're able to cook for yourself and fend for yourself. Um, Granted, it's not normally like that. We do help each other. We take care of each other, all of those things. But I ask for people in order to not be extractive, in order for them to not practice extractivism interpersonally with my people and my elders who are already struggling, which I consider a frontline space. I ask them to come correct, and by coming correct, I mean like do your homework, learn what these systems have done to my people, learn the history of the Mormons, of the Christians, of the Catholics in these regions, learn the history of, the Marshall Trilogy and federal Indian law, and how all of these systems have been carefully curated to be able to continue this process of land theft and genocide against Diné people and Pueblo people and people all over. Because for me, the struggle between Hopi and Diné people isn't a struggle between our people. It's a struggle of sovereignty, autonomy. It's a struggle of protecting what's sacred and what people would say are resources. And the Western community, the Western society, especially the government, wants to try to use identity politics to destroy the kinship that exists between Hopi and Diné people. And my family, we are both Diné and Hopi. So when we were relocated, it tore my family apart. I mean, my great grandparents were medicine people, and they were medicine people for both Diné and Hopi people. And so we were very, very, integrated and tied into our communities on both sides. So to see this violence and this meanness, this ugliness towards like my people, that's like it's an internal thing that I'm just kind of propping up a little bit because it's there. I don't want people to be surprised. It's there, and it exists between a lot of different people all over the world where people are at odds with each other. But I want to say that that is very intentional. That is not the way that our people were. That is not how we remember our histories. Like most of us will recall and will reference instances when we celebrated each other, when we went to ceremonies together, when we threw out the Spanish together,
Yeah.
when Diné people helped with 1680, and just wanting to really uplift those moments in history where we actually showed up for each other and helped each other. That's why we're still here. And so the history of Black Mesa is really complicated. And I always like to uplift like some of the documentaries that some of my local elders have created. One of them is like The Last Stories of the Diné with an H, um, by Nabahi. And there's another one, Broken Rainbows, that is really well known, talks about Big Mountain and what happened. But also, if you wanted to stay updated, we do have like sheep camp and wood camp. We do report backs. We do political education here in Southern Tiwa Pueblo territories. And there are a lot of people who come from all over the world. We have people who have come from Japan who have come out to Black Mesa and helped my elders chop wood.
Yeah.
Like our struggles are known internationally, and it's so sad that within the belly of the beast, within US empire, so many people are not aware of what's happening in their own backyard. And so yeah, I just wanted to uplift like some of those different dynamics. I might have gotten away from the question.
No, it's okay. It kind of went into the next question we had too, which is like, what is sheep camp and wood camp?
Mm,
How can folks get involved?
okay, yes. So sheep camp, we actually just had sheep camp, so I'll start there. It's in the spring. Um, Sheep camp is exactly what it is, sheep camp. So, as I had shared, a lot of my people, we're weavers. We live off of the land. We sheep herd. Um, we have a very, very beautiful relationship with the life around us, and especially the sheep. We will oftentimes have grandmas who have so many sheep, and those are all their babies. And it is our job to help take care of these babies. And so we will essentially sheep herd them. We'll help with shearing them because, I mean, if you have 60 sheep and you're just one elder, that's a lot of sheep to shear. Um, and then we also like use sheep in our spiritual and cultural practices. And so there's a sheep is life for a lot of Diné people.
Mhm.
um, but sheep camp is really important because the reality is there's not a lot of access to resources, as well as even people across the Black Mesa region, and it's a huge region. There's different districts. I'm from District 7, Jedito District, which is farther away from the coal mine. But I think it's really important to name that the elders really need a lot of support, and what sheep camp is there for. Sometimes we're there to sheep herd, sometimes we're there to sheep shear, sometimes we're there to help put up an outhouse and dig a hole. Other times we're helping repair hogans. Maybe we're doing a solar installation in one of the hogans because we have access to a solar suitcase that will bring heat into the home. Because the reality also is because of the history of colonialism across Navajo Nation, and scorched earth theory in particular, there is very limited access to resources. And there's a reason why so many Diné people are dependent on the systems that the Western societies and communities have. And that's important to name. If you don't know what burned scorched earth theory is, it's important to read up on that history. That is when the colonizers would set fire to all of our farms and our crops as a way to subjugate us and make us dependent on them, and which they would give us food boxes, and there would be like a big thing of alcohol in those food boxes to create a dependency on these substances. And so that's like a very historical process of colonization that happened for generations, right? So we're seeing something similar happen in Black Mesa, a continuation of that same process, which is again just not having access to resources and making it very difficult to live, especially as our elders get older. And so sheep camp is we're really just there to be bodies on the ground, to be there to support. If you have sheared a sheep, let me just say it is rough. Like this last time for sheep camp, I tackled a sheep that was bigger than me, and that was rough. Like it is, and most of those sheep, like they eat good. You know, they're eating medicines, they're out there walking around, like, and it's tough. And so if you think of like an elder in her 70s or 80s roping a sheep down and then tying them up, like it's a lot.
Mhm.
And so it's important to help and to support. And the reality is a lot of the community has moved away, like especially the younger community, because there's no resources, there's no school. One of Selena would actually tell me quite often, yeah, like my kids have to leave because there's no jobs here, and the only jobs that they have is at the coal mine or doing some level of mining. And I'm just like, literally, like, the only options that you have is to live culturally with access to no money or go and work for the oppressor. Like,
Yeah.
those are your options. And that's the reality. And it's made that way. There's a reason why business permits are difficult to get on the reservation. There's a reason why there's only, I think there's probably a few more, but I know back in 2020 there was only 14 grocery stores across the res or something like that. It was like it's very little for a reservation the size of Rhode Island. And so, instances like that, it's really important to know. For sheep camp, it's important for us to show up and to be able to offer those resources and support. So sometimes we're hauling out lumber, to help fix a hogan or a chow or the top of a building. So we're really just there to be helpful and accessible. And sheep camp varies. So sheep camp it really is up to the elders, and it's really up to the season when we have sheep camp. It's really up to the elements. And so that's the other thing is we need people who are able to support, who are flexible, who are adaptable, because things shift and change, and we got to be ready to shift and change with it.
Another way that you can support is through sheep herding. I was able to go up this past summer for 2 weeks. It was super cool. I woke up at like 5 a.m. to take the sheep out. It was like a 5-hour long hike. It was fun. But as I was talking to people, they would be confused like, you're herding sheep on the reservation. Like, what does this mean? How does this help Indigenous resistance? And I was just kind of like, this is the way that elders are asking for support, and it's important to follow in the footsteps of the people who are experiencing this oppression and not kind of lead the way. But yeah, what would you say to that? Like, how does sheep herding and shearing support Indigenous resistance?
Sheep herding is resistance.
Period.
Amen.
It's non-negotiable. If you talk to any Diné elder,
Yeah.
sheep herding is a part of life. It's what they deserve. If you are going to, utilize a life because a sheep, it has a life, it has a spirit. Then they deserve life to the fullest. If you know that you are going to butcher it one day, then it deserves a life of the fullest. And so sheep, I used to laugh. Sheep actually sometimes got treated better than me growing
Oh
up. Like
God.
the sheep got to sleep in, was bottle fed and everything. I'm just kidding. Um, but no, I would say it's really important for people to understand. It's less about the sheep and the sheep like herding or sheep shearing process, and more about the reality that elders have a need, and how are we going to meet that need?
Mhm.
And those are the people who are living the struggle. Those are the people who are living off of the land materially. Because also, I want to name, like, I'm somebody who moves from different camps to different camps. Sometimes I'm in urban spaces, sometimes I'm in rural spaces. And I'm very privileged in that way. Because the reality is some of my elders, some young people, some like a lot of people, a lot of Diné people just live back home, and they live back home full time. They don't leave and go other places. They're in that struggle there. And I think that it's really important that we are prioritizing and centering people who are living that struggle every day. And I really try and do that by taking steps back in how visible I am when I talk about my work back home, because the people who should be getting uplifted and the people who should be listened to are the people who are living that every single day. So my elders, whatever they say goes, right? Whatever they want. If they want you to repair the fence or build a rock skirt for the garden, like that's what needs to get done. And it's important that we're following their lead, because they are the people who are living that struggle. And the best way for you to help them resist is to support them with what they need.
Yeah, I was actually able to drive a tractor for the first time during my time up there. I helped haul rocks, and Paul made a little something in one of the, what's it called? Um
In a wash.
Wash. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Wash.
That wash is huge. It's basically becoming its own little canyon. So I imagine there's a lot of work happening.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. I wanted to ask you, what is your hope for your people and for your family in Black Mesa?
Whew. Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. What is the hope for my people? Well, I think the big hope for me is land back and a right of return for my people, for all people, um, from Palestine to Deneta. I want my people to be able to come home and to be able to visit our sacred sites and to be able to have access to the things that they need. Because everybody else is siphoning resources from us and is able to live around us, but those of us who have been protecting what's being siphoned. And so for me, it's really important that people understand that, like, land back is one aspect of the liberation movement, but a right of return for our people to come home is the other. And that is, it goes hand in hand. I'm really, really thankful and blessed that I am relocating home. I actually just started going back home a few weeks ago. And so I'm really blessed because my great grandma was an armed resistor, and she resisted relocation until our home was bulldozed. And she was a very powerful woman in my life, and she was a Diné elder that lived to 109, allegedly. That's what she told me. That's what I'm going with. And so my grandma was a medicine person who did tinle. She was a hand trembler. She was everything to my family. And my medicine is really has been cultivated because of her and through her. I apprenticed and worked with her for 9 years before she passed. She was my best friend, and it was our dream to move home and to start a farm and to continue to sing our songs and weave and upkeep this practice that she was taught by her grandmas. And so for me, I think that is what is the hope, is that my people get to come home, and hopefully they get to come home with their grandparents. I'm really blessed that I get to bring mine with me when I go home. And I would really love to see my people flourishing like we once did, um, in a lifetime before colonialism, where we were trading with our Pueblo relatives, with our Apache relatives, with our relatives across the global South. Um, I want to see a world where many worlds fit. I want to see a world where, you know, all of these hordes of resources get distributed out
Mm.
to everybody, so that nobody has to worry about housing or clean water or clean air. Everybody gets to live. Mm. I really, really appreciate how like land back has become like a trend. To see it everywhere is pretty hot. I don't think that people really, really understand what land back means. Which is fine because they're saying it, and that's the first step. But I would say for me, like whenever I think of land back, when I hear land back, I think literally land back, give the land back. All of this land is native land. None of it ever belonged to European colonizers, ever. And it still doesn't. And it's something that's really beautiful in like even the history here in unceded Southern Tiwa Pueblo territories, in the way that like treaties and different country borders have dictated um, the colonizers' relationship with the indigenous people. And so for me, when I think of land back, I think of people recognizing and understanding that this land is not theirs, that it doesn't belong to the government. Shoot, it doesn't even belong to us, but we are the stewards of it. We have been stewarding the land since time immemorial. We know, those of us who work on the land and work with it, we know what it needs, and we protect it. We recharge the aquifers. We build things that'll help with the water flow. We coexist in harmony with other life, like beavers and other ways of life, helping almost curate the life that we have, I guess.
Mhm.
Um and so for me, it's really important that people understand like these like structures that have been built on native land. We have to really intentionally analyze if they are actually beneficial for the land, or is it beneficial for somebody or a corporation.
Mhm. So
Land back.
land back, yeah. So I think land back is a it's controversial, and I think that people get scared. Settlers, I'll say, settlers get scared of it. Even if folks are like, yeah, like you deserve the land back, but like I live here. What do I do? What would you say
I
to
feel
that?
like stay living here.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's really important because I feel like these terms are ways that people will create divisiveness at times,
Mm.
and really they're terms that are to help us understand our relationship to land and space and our relationship to each other.
Mhm.
So like the way that I even understand settler is somebody who comes and settles on land that is not theirs, that their people don't come from, and maintain their own cultural or spiritual or religious practices. You're settling. You're a settler then, because you're not adopting the practices of the native people who steward the land. You're bringing your own. And so that's a settler. And that's how I identify people who are settlers. And it's not specific to like European settlers. I think like if we want to go deeper, we can say where people are from: Poland settlers, German settlers, whatever. Um, so that's one thing. And I also think that being able to talk about land is really important, because something that really stuck with me when I was first starting this work was my grandmas would say, "We don't own the land owns us. We belong to the land. We are nature defending itself when we are engaging in this work, when we are taking up our our traditional practices, our cultural practices, and we are practicing the values and the laws like and Hajan and um, when we are uplifting those Diné practices, then we are able to really embody the resistance and the spirit of our ancestors. And I think for me, that's how I see land back. Land back is us being able to continue to practice those practices because we're not able to. Like we can't even access our sacred sites nowadays. You know, Chaco Canyon has become a national monument space where they're fracking. Like we would never if we had the autonomy and sovereignty and the self-determination like this so-called nation says we do,
Mhm.
we would have never let them frack outside of the 10-mile buffer zone. I mean,
That's being fought all the time. Yeah.
literally like and 10 miles is like that's not even okay.
Yeah.
Like that's not even that's who said 10?
Yeah.
I'd say 100.
Right.
Like, but that's the thing is like, and it's so frustrating because like land back, for example, let's apply it to Chaco Canyon. Land back would mean that like Chaco Canyon would be acknowledged as a sacred site for all of the indigenous people across the so-called Americas because indigenous people from the global south, from Peru, from Ecuador, from Guatemala, they all would migrate up here and trade with us, time immemorial. It's a sacred site. It's a sacred space. And we've always caretaken it. And it's really unfortunate to see the ways that we have been colonized to be complacent and complicit in the construction of systems that continue to seize and steal from our relatives and from our lands. And that's something that I'm like, land back really just means that land back. It would go back to Native people. Native people would govern it. We would dictate how it's being used, what is appropriate, what's not appropriate. And I want to just again ground again, it's not about control and power. And I think like within colonial, like Western systems, even just like probably in a lot of settlers' minds, that's how they understand this. And it's not about power. It's about love. It's about loving yourself as a life, as a person, as something that exists within and amongst others and loving other life just the same and wanting to protect it. Like I'm a land defender and a water protector because my great grandma would tell me every time I came into ceremony, if I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna pray to like and say water is life, I better be willing to put my body on the line for it, like I would my sister or her. I better be willing to protect the water just as much as I would protect her. And that really like it stuck with me. And it was from that moment on I understood. I was just like, oh, I get it. I completely get it now. I This isn't activism. It's not just a job. This is like if I'm a Diné, this is what I need to do to be a Diné. And if I'm not doing it, I'm not Diné. Cuz being Diné, being the people, we have protocols, we have systems, we have history, we have creation stories. We don't have to go outside of this world to understand like why we exist and what we're here for. And it works. We have herbs. We have like yeah, we have herbs that heal people that like these Western systems say that it's incurable. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's
Right.
for cancer and other things. And so I just always want to uplift like when we say land back, like it's really a movement not just for people and humans, it's a movement of life. It's requesting and centering that life be centered again amongst itself and not corporate greed and not, Western systems or structures or this idea to control wildlife and how many bears are out there in the mountain. Like, why do we need to know that? Why are we chipping them? They have every right to exist here just like we do. And so it's really interesting just to when we talk about land back, like the way that it's trending. It's like this like movement slogan and it's great. Yes, say land back and also mean what you say. Stand on it. If you're somebody who has land, look up whose land you're occupying and see how you can build a relationship with those native people and give them access to that land. Start a farm that feeds those native peoples and brings them in. Invite them in and understand that that doesn't mean that, you're entitled to their space, you're entitled to that knowledge or anything like that, because that's something you have to check. That's white supremacy. That needs to go back to Europe or somewhere. Not here. Not here. That can go on. But just wanting to say, like, it's really important that people really check those things and see the way that they move, that really is further colonizing. And when we talk about land back, the way that that term is being appropriated is far from the way that it's actually supposed to be used, which is like land back means land back. It means you give the land back. It means it is not New Mexico land. It is not Burque. It is not Albuquerque. It is Southern Tiwa Pueblo lands. That is what it is. And it's really important that people understand that. And it's so interesting because I actually learned that from Palestine. So I learned about rejecting settler colonial names of spaces because that's a form of colonization and it's a form of assimilation into their systems, to recognize these colonial names and these colonial like spaces, because it's still native land. Albuquerque is native land, but it's been colonized. It started out as a trading post and it became the monster it is now. And it's really important for people to acknowledge that a fourth of every tribal community exists in Tiwa lands. And so we're here. We've never left. And it's really important that people understand, like when I went to Palestine, Palestinians refused to call so-called Israel Israel. They refused to say the name. They would say inside 48 to reference in 1948 when the Nakba started is when we became estranged to our homelands. That's when this creator was put down and we were no longer able to access our homeland. And they're like, so we say inside 48. We don't say Israel. Israel does not exist. It's not real. It's inside 48. And they showed me like maps as they were trying, as the so-called, like the Israelis and the IDF were trying to erase like Ramallah and Nablus, like certain spaces off of maps. And they were like, this is a very, very specific tool of colonization and a way to assimilate people into this new thought that would replace us. And so I take that analysis and I apply that to here. 200, 300 years later down the road, that's essentially where we are now, post-apocalyptic for a lot of us indigenous people. We're living half lives that our ancestors lived because we don't have access to a lot, including just basic necessities to live. Which I think is also why like we relate so hard with the Palestinian struggle for liberation. Like I roll hard for my Palestinian relatives and for their movement and struggle, and I'll put my body on the line for it any day, because I know and I believe that in my heart, if other people were around when my people were being put in concentration camps, people would have did the same because like I would. And so anyways, just going back to land back, it's really important that people understand like how settler colonialism permeates in so much of the systems around us and so much in even like the education and the history that we're taught. And we have to really question who's telling the story, who is the audience, and where do they come from? Because I really want to hear about land back from like some Lakota people, from some Ojibwe people, some Pueblo people. Like I want to know, what does land back mean for them? You know, and like for Dene people, what does land back mean for us? Because we're like historically migrants, right? Like we're somewhat nomadic. Like Dene people, we've always been here. Don't get me wrong, we've always been here. And then also I want to always reference like on my Hopi side, like we've always been here. But also our people have always migrated too. And migration was never looked down upon until colonialism, until like the colonizers came here and then they were like, you can't be here. And so then people are like, oh, we can't migrate because we might not be able to come back. And so it's like, and some people didn't. Historically, there were Diné people who would build a hogan and then they'd stay wherever the hogan was built. And so it's like we did settle. Hey, we're not a settler, but but just to say that, like, you know, we did. We that was still a valid form of life, you know, and it's because of colonization that sometimes people will be like, "Oh, well, you're not really from here." And it's like, "I don't know about that, yo. Like, let's not get into that." Because the reality is I think it's important that we acknowledge like there was ebbs and flows. There was a balance. Some people would follow, you know, the buffalo. And there's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't make them any less indigenous or make their sacred spaces any less sacred. And so, like, things like that, I think are really important to unpack because it leads into this bigger process of, like, yes, land back and also a right of return. Because historically, too, like, some people didn't just stay in one place every season. sometimes we moved on the seasons, you know? And so just wanting to say that like it is a lot broader. It is more complicated. It's very specific. If you're not an indigenous person, then get to know what land back means to the indigenous people around you, because I can promise you it probably is a little different. We're all asking for the same thing: land back,
That's
resources
why we
back.
say that.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Resources back, water back, relatives back. Like that is all a part of land back, right? We are
Mhm.
part of the land. We want our relatives back.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. That's so important. I love what you said about like language and naming things. I wrote a poem about that actually a while
Oh.
ago, and like I think that's so important to like say what you mean to say. You know what I mean? Like calling it Palestine and not acknowledging that it's Israel.
Mhm.
Like that's so important because maybe someone doesn't know the history. Maybe you saying that or saying so-called New Mexico or the so-called United States, someone might be like, "Wait, why'd you say that?" And then you
Mhm.
get to explain a little bit and then they get to learn something and then
Mhm.
look, one more person knows.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's definitely I think the goal. Like as a revolutionary, something that I would say a lot, because I started off in like my revolutionary like political analysis with when I helped with co-founding the Red Nation.
Mhm.
And so when we co-founded the Red Nation, it was just a bunch of us Native folks. I mean, I was living on the streets at the time. So I was like in and out of homeless shelters and really struggling, trying to do my best. And it was really like in those moments, because I was a liberal. I was a pacifist. I was on the streets just trying. I was begging for support. I mean, not in the same way that I think people expect, because I was a very prideful, unsheltered person, but I was struggling. You know, I was going through it. And um when I had first go out went to like Red Nation meetings, as a community member, I'd never felt so empowered. And it felt so beautiful to be like, dang, like my people care about me. There are
Mhm.
Native people here who want to make sure I ate, who
Mhm.
want to make sure that I have a ride back to my shelter. And that was like the most kinship I had experienced. And
Yeah.
that was like honestly laid the groundwork also for my analysis around communism, because we shared. We really didn't hoard, and we really wanted to share power, because there was more power with a group of us than there was with just one of us. And so it was through them that I actually got really politicized and being able to articulate my experiences, because there for a minute there were people who were writing articles on me and they were using my story as a way to put down my people, because I was like I was unsheltered and I was a minor. And ICWA, they CYFD failed me, and I sued them for it. But
Eh.
but they didn't apply ICWA to my case, and I was a minor, and I should have went back to a kinship guardian space. I should have went like my tribal community should have been notified. I was tribally enrolled, but they didn't. And so it's the same process, you know, of its history repeats itself. And I think that it's really important that people understand the core of what the so-called United Snakes is, which is white supremacy, imperialism, capitalism,
Mhm.
and patriarchy especially. And I think that it's really important for people to know like none of those systems are rooted in the land here or the people here, and it needs to go on somewhere else. It needs to be destroyed, it needs to be abolished in every aspect of it. And I truly believe that, because people over property. These buildings don't mean anything.
Mhm.
They really don't. I would choose my people
Mhm.
any day, every day
Yeah.
over a building.
Yeah. That's so funny. I think that's why I get so frustrated by people talking about like now what we're seeing with the Trump administration and like how um every marginalized community is like so much worse off than we were like maybe 5 years ago.
Mm.
And I think it's so important that we say that that's what the United States has always been. It's
Mm.
not just Trump. It's not like this new wave of like this has been here. This is what we've always been in this country.
Mm.
So, yeah, thank you for saying that. I think that's really important to say. And in terms of land back, like we also talk about at Yucca, like land back is a climate solution.
Mm.
Um,
Yes.
and like it's like so obvious to me. Seems
Absolutely.
like it to me, like, like okay, the problem, right? Climate change. We're emitting too much. We're heating the world up and we're causing destruction. Why is that happening? When you look upstream a little bit, like it's because of all these systems like we were talking about. And so the solution to that has to be land back. Like traditional ecological knowledge is the solution. Like, scientists from the Western world are noticing patterns and seeing things, but they're not gonna solve the problem, partially because they're not given the power and partially because they just don't know, you know? So
Absolutely.
I realized I got my degree in environmental science, and like learning about like the science of climate crises and all of that stuff is like I'm like, okay, there's such a clear solution here. Like,
Literally.
it seems so obvious to me. And I remember recommending the book Braiding Sweetgrass to one of my professors, and he was like, white guy. Yeah, he was like, all my professors are white guys, but he was like, "Oh my God, this book changed my life." And I'm like, "You've been in this field for 40 years and like you've never had this mindset of like
Mm.
that we're not separate from the earth. We're not separate from the environment. We are the environment." And like it just always seemed normal to me. And so yeah, that's why we talk about land back as a climate solution.
I love
Yeah.
that. I love
Mhm.
that so much because I think in the climate like resistance movement, indigenous people oftentimes get erased,
Mhm.
or heavily tokenized
Yeah.
and romanticized. Um, I mean, it is a fact that we make up as indigenous people 5% of the global population, but we protect 80% of the biodiversity. It is very clear that we are a solution to the climate happenings and climate disasters in place. Like our traditional and cultural ways of living and existing on the land provides a blueprint for people to be able to also live on the land in a way that is not extractive, in a way that is not um, abusive, um, in balance. It's important to really, really uplift balance. And that's something that I've really come to appreciate in my travels around the world is the amount of indigenous people who really, really uphold a balanced lifestyle. And it's something that I really appreciate because I feel like we're still not balanced, even though we're able to talk about these systems in like English and really articulate our histories and stuff. At the end of
Yeah.
the day, we're still asking for peace. And
Right.
I'm like, that's not balance because the systems around us are perpetuating violence. And what did Frantz Fanon say? Frantz Fanon said concerning violence that oftentimes we are having to respond in self defense to violence. And it's important that people understand we are actively experiencing violence. And so when we are resisting, when we are taking the streets, when we are boycotting, when we are divesting, even when we're getting arrested and or even just fighting for our lives, that is self-defense against colonialism. And we have to be less hard on each other and our people and communities in the ways that they're surviving colonialism. Because the reality is, poverty is not human. It's anti-life. It's definitely a system that has been curated. We live in one of the most um richest empires in the world, biggest military budget, you know,
Yeah.
and our people are going hungry and are unsheltered. It's like, I mean, people are getting, it's like heat, exhaustion left and right amongst our communities. People are living outside in the elements and we're in the desert and our Rio is completely dry. Like I'm looking at that every time I'm passing and I'm like, dang, like this is scary. This is apocalyptic. This is
Mhm.
post-apocalyptic. Like I never thought that I would see the river dry in my lifetime. And I am so upset. I'm like, why are we like free the water? Why is the water caged?
Mhm.
Free the water. Get
Mhm.
rid of the dams. Get rid of the government. Nay.
Yeah.
Colonial governments.
Yeah.
Because they're not normal. They're anti-life. And like if you really want to be in good relation with the land, then you need to be in good relation with the people who take care of the land. And right now, most people are not in good relation with Native people. Most people don't even know what anti-Indianism is. Most people don't even know, you know, indigenous histories around them. They just know maybe Geronimo, maybe Sitting Bull.
Yeah.
That's it. And now maybe land back.
Mhm. I sure hope they learn something.
Right. I hope so
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much we could keep talking about land back forever, I feel like.
Yes.
But
Wood
I
camp.
do want to talk about wood camp. Yeah. So what is wood camp? How is it
Okay.
different from sheep camp? How can folks get involved?
Okay. So I first got involved in some of the specific labor work that we're doing in Black Mesa through wood camp. And I want to name like one of the reasons that wood camp is so important to the community across Black Mesa is because oftentimes people have been dependent on coal. a lot of the elders and communities out there. I mean, Black Mesa, as in the name, in quoting Peabody Coal Mine and what they said about Black Mesa, they said Black Mesa is basically just a big coal.
Mm.
That's how they talk about our homeland, and we're just sitting on top of it.
Yeah.
And that being said, coal is definitely a way that some of our elders have been able to keep warm in the wintertime. We have very, very harsh winter times. It's like a lot of highs and lows, and you're in the desert, so it's intense and there's no resources around you. And if you don't have running water and electricity, then you're dependent on a fire to keep you warm throughout the day and night. And we are talking about elders who are living in these conditions, oftentimes who don't have the abilities to. I mean, they do. Actually, they do. My elders are very strong and resilient, and I've seen elders that are in their 90s out there chopping wood, and it blows my mind. And I'm just like, put me to work. What can I do?
Mhm.
And that's what Wood Camp is about, is how do we show up and support our elders with what they need, because they shouldn't have to do that by themselves. And we know why their children are not able to be there for them at times, which is because they are working outside of the reservation. And I want to encourage those relatives to go home and to check in on your relatives more, check in on your elders. The amount of Chays and Masenas that have passed sheep herding in the cold and froze to death every season, heartbreaking.
Mm.
And, I just like, and then also the elders that'll hitchhike and things like that. Like, I just want to like challenge people to just consider. I don't want to shame anybody. I don't believe shame is an effective motivator of change, but I want to challenge people that we need to live balanced lifestyles, and we need to be able to balance taking care of our elders as well as making money and surviving capitalism. And I think that it's really important we prioritize our elders, even if that means that we are not getting as much money. So in Wood Camp, what we do is we will gather the week before Thanksgiving. And we will start assembling camp. Our camp in Wood Camp is a bit more centralized. We have like a main kitchen. We do have COVID protocols because we are around a lot of elders. We have an entire political education curriculum that we go through before people go out to Wood Camp to be prepared to go to Wood Camp. So there's a lot that goes into politicizing people and helping them prep to what they're going to experience and see when they're out in Black Mesa. But Wood Camp is exactly that. We have a camp of people who come from all over, from Colorado, from so-called, I should say, from so-called Colorado, from so-called Utah, so-called LA, all of these spaces, and they will chop wood. And oftentimes we'll be hosted by an elder in their territories, and we'll go around and we'll chop wood um, and distribute it to all of the elders in the region. And for people who don't know, like, we're very ethical people. I, I I always like have to say this because I've had the experience of being in many front lines, and there's some frontliners who have come from places like Stop Cop City that were like, we were there protecting the trees and now we're here chopping them down, and I'm just like, no, that's not the same. It's not the same. Out there is the police and they were chopping down trees. We don't chop down trees that are alive. We just, they're dead and they've dried the whole year and they're ready to be chopped.
Mhm.
And also, like, there's a bunch of them because we don't just chop down trees just to chop down trees like colonizers do. We don't treat the land the way that colonizers do. And so that's why I'm like, I always have to challenge people. Like, you have to reset your brain when you're coming to Black Mesa, because you can't look at the way that people are doing things from that mindset, because we don't do things that way. And granted, there's always exceptions. I don't want to generalize an entire community. We shouldn't do that. There's always exceptions, like there is in any community. But Wood Camp is definitely the space where people are all coming together a week before Thanksgiving. We also do a community feed. I'm always tasked with butchering every year for my elders. And very blessed that, in Dene cultural protocols, we use every part of the sheep, every single part of the sheep, with the exception of the stuff that's the liquids. But even then, some of them we do. And so we're very ethical in the way that we, cultivate and harvest and process our sheep. But Wood Camp is really, really beautiful because it creates an economy for a lot of those elders who are sheep herders. A lot of them are weavers. A lot of them are also jewelry makers. Um, People who just even hold specific skills in our communities. And when we bring out folks to support with Wood Camp, we also have created a space where elders are then able to sell their weavings at the price that they want, which is huge because oftentimes historically trading posts have completely exploited elders. I remember like my grandma told me she would weave a weaving that could probably sell in Santa Fe for like $10,000 or more, and she would go to a trading post and they would give her a box of food. It breaks my heart, like hearing those stories from my great grandma and my grandmas about how they've been exploited. And they're like some of the best weavers, like they're master weavers. And for them, like now they wouldn't be exploited as much, but still it's heartbreaking. And so that's like the reality of the conditions is like when you go to the reservation, people just don't give like the top quality. And that's what we're trying to change. We're trying to change that. Like this is top quality and people deserve to be compensated for their labor and their time and their energy at the price that they put. And there's no negotiating it. If the elder says that's the price, that's the price. There's no negotiating that. And if you can't afford it, then don't buy it because I can promise you that that elder still is probably lowballing that price because they're like grateful that we're chopping wood. We're butchering and we're there. And my people are such loving and giving people, especially our elders. They just love company. They just love being like considered visited. And I just really want to put this out there. Like it's beautiful to have so many guests and comrades and allies come out to Black Mesa, but I really, really would love to see more Dene people come out. Our Dene elders want to see Dene people. They want to see our people helping each other. And that's like part of the decolonial process, right? Because decolonization is not a metaphor, it's a practice. And part of that is not going into doing things to get something in return or to commodify that experience or to, put a price tag on those things. Like we should just value each other because Ke says that we do and should. And so that's something that I'm like, it's really important that we are uplifting some of those values. And so Wood Camp is really a space where we can cultivate and create kinship. We build an underground economy also for Dene people. If you're from the region in Black Mesa, and you come out to help chop wood, because most of our elders also speak Dene Bazad, so we need guides and we need translators. I'm a guide and a translator. Even though I wouldn't say I'm fluent in Dene Bazad, but I'm on my way to being better. But we need help, and we do compensate people who come out because we don't believe in extractivism. And we know that Dene people are taking time out of work in order to show up for our elders. And so we ask our guests, relatives, our people who are a bit more financially stable to help us with being able to compensate, bringing younger people, younger Dene people back to our homelands to help chop wood. And so we're creating this underground economy that is really beautiful where we are actually sustaining ourselves. And we're understanding that we are closer in alignment to like what we would call communism in the way that we are trading labor and time and energy and resources. Or I guess socialism would probably be a better way to talk about that because socialism is the vehicle to communism. Socialism is the ways that people are able to reimagine a world that centers social services and health services and clinics and things that we need to survive versus centering businesses and money. And I think that that's really important because that's in closer alignment with Indigenous practices. And that's why so many Indigenous people around the world are revolutionary socialists or communists. Like we are the OG Red Scare. Like we've been practicing and doing this, and we inspired some of those theories of change that people are uplifting and using. And that's just like kudos to Indigenous people all over the world. And it's something that I really love to emphasize and uplift because people are always trying to take it from us. And I'm like, no, Indigenous people deserve to be centered. We deserve to be considered. We deserve to have our history intertwined with this revolutionary resistance that has been happening because we've helped inspire it. And it's something that I'm like really, really big on because in Wood Camp is where we get to bring in all of our people in our community, and our elders get to report back to people. So when we have the community feed, sometimes our elders will like put out like they'll be vending their arts, their goods, And then also we'll hear from them. We'll hear about like the hydrogen pipeline that they're trying to build through Black Mesa. We'll hear about the hydrogen hubs that they're trying to create across so-called New Mexico. We get to hear about the way that the Boo Nigrin, who is the so-called Navajo Nation president, sold out our people and said that he wants to further develop coal. And it's like, what, at the expense of our people, at the expense of our elders, at the expense of our lands? Like, we already have over 500 open uranium mines. We already have arsenic in the blood of babies that are born on the reservation, every single one of them. We already have birth defects. We already have cancer. We already have health struggles. So we're going to go ahead and create another extractive industry that's going to exacerbate those struggles. Like, you can't make this up. So when I look at Boo Nigrin, and it's really frustrating because that's like the clearest depiction of liberalism that I can name. He looks Dene. Yeah, he has a TL and everything, speaks Dene and everything. But literally, it's just the face. Like, there is no values there. I was joking the other day. I was like, somebody needs to chop off that TL because there's no knowledge there if he's selling out our people and selling out the land and selling out our water.
Yeah.
That might take it a little too far. But I'm just saying that Seattle is supposed to represent your knowledge. So what are you doing, Boo? Why are you selling out our people? Why are you selling out our elders, the heart of our people, our knowledge keepers? They don't have running water or electricity. It's like, it breaks my heart. It makes me so mad. Oh, I get hype.
Yeah.
So it's like things like that. I'm just like, that's a clear depiction of liberalism, identity politics, and for nothing. He looked Dene, and that's about it.
Yeah. It's also kind of like what proximity to power does to you, like no matter where you come from. So, you know, I see that a lot. We see that a lot in the climate movement too, is like the closer you get to like getting a job that makes you more money or like having a like stable life, like the less you contribute to where you came from. So, yeah.
I think that's another reason why I like Sheep Camp and Wood Camp, because it's so humbling and that like you're going there to give your labor.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that you get to leave and some people don't.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a hard way of life. And I think that oftentimes power is sneaky like that. Even like the best person, power can corrupt. And so that's, I think, why community is so important, because we keep each other accountable and we protect each other. Like, the amount of relatives that I will like always have around me to just call me out, love them. Or I should say call me in. They call me in. They're very loving, very, very loving, but very critical people. And I try and surround myself with people like that because power has a way of I mean, I believe that as Dene people, we were always meant to wield power. As a Torticini, that is my job. It is my obligation to live in balance and to be able to wield power and to bring power back to the land and bring power back to my people and bring power back to our principles. And I think that that's very beautiful. And I also think that Western systems have a way of colonizing and assimilating us into their systems of power that is about domination and control and by any means necessary violence, which, I mean, we share that in some ways too. Like, by any means necessary, we're going to protect that water, you best believe.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Thank you so much. It makes me think of this book that I just read called Babel, the necessity of violence. It's a novel, and it's kind of like a fantasy novel about a boy who gets basically taken from his home in China in the 1830s to Britain to do some magic stuff and go to this magic school, and it's all kind of a metaphor for extraction and the way that Britain and the British Empire like extract from all corners of the world. And as he goes to this school, he's there since he's a kid, and so he's like, this is what I'm supposed to do, I have to learn English, I have to learn all these skills. And it's about language also. They bring in these people of color from all different places. There's a someone from Haiti, there's someone from India, and they are brought there to use their language as part of the magic system that exists in the book. And he learns basically over the course of his time being there how racist and how awful it is to be in this institution. It takes place in Oxford too, which is super important. And eventually learns like he's like, "Well, I don't know, like, I have a really good life here, you know? I have a scholarship, I get a stipend, I'm happy, I enjoy studying my language." He gets to study his native tongue, and he's like, "That's a privilege that, you know, if I just lived here, I wouldn't be able to have." So, over the course of the book, you kind of get to see him, like, get closer to power and, like, get all these privileges, but ultimately he learns that, like, this is not my existence, this is not how I was meant to exist, and by participating in this system, I'm only harming my people in
Yep.
my home country. And so he joins he joins this secret society. Spoiler warning, you should read this book. We have a book club portion on the podcast too, so I wanna do a whole, episode just on this book because it's really long, it's really heavy, but it's so good, and he, learns the book is called Babel: The Necessity of Violence, so he learns, like, okay, the only way for us to take down the system is to violently take it down because that is the only thing that empire understands.
And it'll confront and stop
Yes,
that violence.
exactly, because empire is violent.
Yep.
And so what else do they understand? Essentially is the conclusion that he comes to. Um, it's such a good book. Highly recommend it. I listen to it most of the time.
I would love to read it. That
Yeah.
sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was really good.
It sounds a lot like what Frantz Fanon said.
Mhm.
It's like those would probably be paired really well together.
Yeah,
You should read
totally.
both of them.
Yes, yes. Along that line, one of the other questions that we had for you was just like, what resources would you recommend for people to get started on learning about imperialism, colonialism, land back?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay. So, as I had shared earlier, when I first started getting politicized, I was politicized with a bunch of homies, a bunch of Native homies from my undergrad who were we all founded the Red Nation. So, if you look them up, you can find our work there. I have not been a part of the Red Nation for several years now. I'm not active, but I love the Red Nation and I love my people and I love Native people and anybody who is a revolutionary working towards our liberation is my comrade, period. No matter how I feel about them. But I wanted to just name like some of the things that I would really encourage people to look into is to look into things that are important to you and try to, like, for example, if you are somebody who is queer, look into the Stonewall uprisings. Look into third world feminisms. Look into indigenous feminisms, Black and African feminisms. If you are an indigenous person, reading like Roxanne Dunbar-Ortiz, An Indigenous People's History of the United Snakes. There's also, I saw another book that's like an Afro-Indigenous history of the United Snakes, and that looks awesome. I think people should read that too. Reading about the indigenous peoples around you. So like there's a lot of Pueblo authors who I specifically have learned from that I've tried to educate myself with and get familiar with their analysis because I am a guest in their territories. Um, I would say reading on indigenous feminisms. I can't say indigenous feminisms enough because the amount of pushback I get from everybody on my take on feminism is rough. I'm just like, okay, y'all, like, I'm just going to say this right here, right now. Feminisms is taken up by indigenous people, native women, femmes, thems, trans, queer folks all over the world because feminisms is a movement for our liberation as people who are oppressed by patriarchy and misogyny and white supremacy. And feminisms is not the same as white feminism. And I need to make that distinction. But I want to name, like, again, it's a tool that can be utilized and uplifted. And yes, I definitely encourage people to learn about feminisms because it teaches you about intersectionality that was coined by Kimberle Crenshaw in I think 1969. And she was a Black feminist, an African feminist, and she had explicitly named that she had created the word intersectionality to be able to talk about the intersections of oppression that come from people from different backgrounds and communities and identities. And I think that's so important because we see liberalism co-opt the term feminism oftentimes to talk about the intersection of liberation, which is fine. You know, that's great. Yeah, our liberation intersects for sure, for sure. But we also need to be able to be critical around how the structures around us impact us differently and understand the nuance of that and be willing to say, like, you know, that's my relative, but we have different walks of life. We have a different experience. There are some ways that like those experiences intersect. Maybe it's like because we both experience misogyny being, you know, you know, being femmes. But or like maybe because we're both Native people, we experience a lot of anti-Indianism and white supremacy, et cetera, et cetera. Feminism allows for us to have the critical eye to be able to acknowledge the difference in our lived experiences and how that relates to the system around us so that we can stop attacking each other and start attacking the system that is
Together.
creating those. That's right.
Right.
Together, collectively, because our power is in our numbers.
Exactly.
And so feminism, I think, is really important for people to learn about. I also really, really want to uplift learning like the differences in like anarchism, socialism, and communism. There are so many rabbit holes you can go down under. And even like I'm not a Stalinist or a Trotskyist or anything like that, but I've learned from those histories and I've studied them just to be able to say like I see what happened there and be able to say like I want to be able to identify that if I ever see something similar happening in my community now, right? Because if you don't learn about it, you're not going to see it when it's happening. And so I would really encourage people to look into settler colonialism and colonialism as well. Settler Colonialism by Patrick W. Wolf.
Yeah.
Is it W. Wolf? Anyways, Patrick Wolf. Great analysis. And to synthesize it, settler colonialism is the elimination of the native and the assimilation into a colonial system. That's all it is. And so it's a erase and replace process. And it's really important to understand because unless you like really study to understand it, you're not going to be able to see it around you until then. And that's just the reality. And so settler colonialism is really important to learn about. All of these systems are really important to know because it helps you understand why people are struggling and living in the material conditions that they are. And that's what really helps humanize our communities and helps put in perspective why people, are struggling because at the end of the day, like we can't be tearing each other down. Like we're just shooting ourselves in the foot doing that. We have to work together and to support each other and uplift each other, have good boundaries with each other when we don't like each other, because at the end of the day, we are still fighting the same monsters. And in Diné culture, we say like we're monster slayers, and these monsters are capitalism. Excuse me. These monsters are capitalism, colonialism, imperialism, the United Snakes. Those are big monsters, and they're killing life around us. So I would say those are some ways that folks can like those are some specific terms and struggles I would say people should like get to know. I would also recommend to just put some cute like indigenous futurisms in between some of these readings to keep you hopeful because revolutionary hope is a discipline and having revolutionary optimism, having optimism in our struggles of resistance is important because if we are not hopeful, if we're not like, excited about what we're building, how is anybody else going to be?
Right.
And so we have to make the revolution irresistible, as I like to say.
I love that.
And and you can do that, by any means necessary. And I just really want to uplift like we got to keep it cute and we got to keep it critical and we got to keep it analytical and we got to keep it pushing because the colonization don't stop, so neither do we.
Yeah, thank you. That's so good. Make the revolution irresistible. I love that. Cause it's like, yeah, like I've seen a lot of posts being like asking the comments like what radicalized you? And a lot of the times it's like people's experiences and a lot of the times it's like, well, I just am a good person. I just like people. I enjoy my family and I want to eat food and I want to not die. That's what radicalizes people. And that's what brings us all together and making it fun and making it hopeful is the way that we keep going. It's the only way that we keep going.
It's all we got.
Yeah.
And it don't cost anything.
Exactly.
Like, and also it's hard. It's hard out here. And like, I find that some of the people that are my best friends, my comrades are people that I met in struggle. And the way that we just showed up for each other and uplifted and loved each other through that struggle is what's really built this like strong kinship. And I'm like a ride or die. I show up for my people. Like, I'm celebrating 8 sets of charges getting dropped as of 2-3 weeks ago. I'm just like, yeah, my people take care of me and I take care of my people because that's what we've always done. And I know like some of the ways that some of our people engage in resistance can be a bit controversial for people. Like, that I get arrested is something that's really difficult. But I always like to share with people that, like, the way that we engage in organizing looks different, and that's okay. And there's a place for everybody in this movement. If
Mhm.
there are some people who are not able to risk arrest, and I totally get it. I wish more people would, don't get me wrong. I wish more people would be willing, because then people could actually see what power we hold.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, like, their laws are ridiculous, and they can choose not to follow it, and they do it all the time. And it's really interesting when you're a land defender and a water protector, and you're standing up for the water, and they're charging you with, like, domestic terrorism. And then it's like those charges get dropped because you're not a domestic terrorist.
Yeah, crazy thought.
Yes,
Yeah.
wild. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to see them curate these laws to be able to protect their money, because that's what it's about, and label people or label things. Like, even going back to Black Mesa, like, something that's always irked me, for example, is how the governments will turn around and talk about grazing permits for sheep and limit the amount of sheep that elders can have. And I'm like, excuse me, like, Phoenix is siphoning all of the, like, water and electricity from the res, like, and we're sitting here talking about sheep. Like,
Right.
and so it's things like that that I'm like, it puts in perspective when you understand these systems, and when you understand, like, what the values of those systems are. It's much easier to see what the intention or what the goal is. And in this case, it's like, yeah, something that I reference often is that the land theft project is ongoing. Settler colonialism is not just an event, it's an ongoing process. It never stopped. It's been happening for 200 plus years. It's still happening now. And we have to be really, really intentional about how we are fighting that system, because it's really easy to slip into complacency. It's really easy to get comfortable. And I don't blame anybody who slips into it. I've slipped into it. There are times when I'm like, I just need a self-care day, and I'm just gonna plug out, like, all the way out. And it's okay to take a day. It's a whole different thing to take, like, a month, 2 months. Like, our elders don't get to rest. Like, I make it a point to, like, go out there and try and really treat my elders, my relatives, because I'm like, they're just so hardworking, and I like those. That's where I want to be. The discipline that my elders have to get up every morning, and that their healing, their self care has become a labor of love in the work that they do. Like, they are able to sustain themselves by, like, they love the sheep so much, it's a joy to do sheep herding. And, like, for some people it's like work, and I'm like, it's interesting because my elders would be like, it's a labor of love. And, like, there's nothing else I'd rather be doing. And, like, those are the people that I look up to. I'm just like, wow, like, that's internet. It's just like, wow.
Yeah.
I get starstruck over my people, because I'm like, it's beautiful to, and so refreshing to see just, like, a different way of life that is not the one that exists in, like, urban spaces where people are like, I need to get a job in order to, like, feed myself and the people around me. And it's like, we need to go out there and plant some corn, and we need to go out there and plant some other plants to be able to sustain ourselves. We need to go out there and hunt, like, some of these, like, very specific ways of living that you do for yourself, right? That you can go and get your own food and make it. You know where it comes from. Like, that, there's something very special about that. And also, like, shout out to the homies who are vegetarians and vegans and just planting. No hunting for them. They just the gatherers.
Yeah. There's a place for everyone.
That's right. There's a place for everybody. And so, anyways, that's like my hot take on it. Is there's a place for everybody. We need people who are willing to, as Red Nation would put it, fold the chairs, put up the tables. But we also need people who are willing to, help put up the yurts, help chop the wood, help shear the sheep. Like, it's a way that we can show up for each other outside of capitalism, and that we can learn from one another and be good relatives. Be a good relative to one another. And for a lot of people who have never been introduced to terms like that, or you've only been exposed to, like, very appropriative or romanticized versions, like, being a good relative is a lot. It's a very beautiful experience in Indigenous lifeways. It means that you show up. It means you do the work, and it means that you're open to learning about different ways of life and different ways of thinking from people that you're showing up for. And being a good relative is a commitment. It's not just something like you don't just get to call somebody a relative and walk away and never see them again.
Mhm.
Like
Where's the relation there?
exactly. It's like that's liberalism again. We are appropriating terms and misusing them, and we need to stop doing that. Like we need to stand on some business here. We need to really practice the ways that these words are being used, um and also show that like there are a lot of instances that's very performative and very very liberal. And don't get me wrong, like I do think that there is a place for liberalism. We do live under capitalism. If you are a part of a nonprofit, if you are somebody who has access to wealth, like figure out how to utilize your proximity to those resources to be able to distribute them to our people and to people who don't have them, like me. Or other people like who are on the res or who are like in urban spaces, who are unhoused, etc., who are trying to make a living. Like figure out how to spread those resources around if you have proximity to those systems. Like don't just sit there in your shame. Well, don't sit there in your shame. Shame is not helpful for none of us.
Right.
Do some work. Do some work. If you have access to resources, have access to funds, have access to things, help get that access out to people who don't have it. And the revolution is not going to be 501c3 funded. It is also not going to be televised. But I will say that right now, there are ways that you can help those of us who are helping build that revolution, because we are surviving. We are figuring it out. Water protectors, land defenders, we do need help with jail support funds, with legal support funds. We do need help with transition funds. We need help with being able to live in specific spaces or travel to ceremony or travel to cultural spaces, cultural camps, things like that. Those are ways that you can plug in and help. It's not everybody can be on the front line. Some people have to work to feed their babies, and I've always looked at it like it's an honor that I'm Nuglet, that I'm Two-Spirit, that I'm intersex, and I'm able to show up in frontline spaces because I don't have the same obligations that like somebody with a similar body to me would have. Like most of the time folks have children and I can't have kids. And so I show up in all of the spaces for all of the other young people and kids that are mine as well. And you know what I mean? Like there's a place for all of us, and it's an honor. Because some people would say, oh, well, there's something wrong with you. And I'm like, well, I choose to look at it that it's because of this that I'm able to show up in these ways, and I'm able to make room in my life to do things that other people can't. And it's an honor. And I always appreciate the support to do this work because I can do it. And I also always share like the resources and funds that I get. Like I'm very much intact in my communities, many communities, and I'm a communist. I share my wealth, I share my resources, I share my space, and I really hope that people can like kind of like try and adopt that mentality, because we really need to learn how to share more with one another. And I think that's what I love about mutual aid, is that mutual aid is teaching people that we actually don't need to hoard resources. And if something is sitting there and accessible and somebody needs it, get it to them. Like we need to really unlearn white supremacist values of hoarding resources. And you know there's so many that I could go into about white supremacy, but
I know. Yeah.
but that's a whole nother one. And I think that's something that we need to, like, mutual aid. Indigenous people are some of the first sites of mutual aid. And like, again, I think within Western systems and ideologies of change and resistance, people are missing the opportunity to connect our struggle as Native people to theirs. And that's what I would encourage people to do. Connect our fucking struggles. Connect our struggles, because we're there. Like if you see a camp, a frontline camp, I can bet there's a Native person there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you see a protest happening, I can bet there's a Native person there. If you see like anything that's happening, especially if it has to do with the land or people's quality of life, like you're going to see us. And so it's an opportunity for us to bridge, to be able to talk about each other's struggles. And I really want people to not forget us. Don't let colonizers erase us from history and from these spaces and places, because they will. Don't let them.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. Speaking of sharing resources, how can people directly donate to the resistance of Black Mesa?
We have a GoFundMe. I would recommend. Let me pull up my phone. We have several things. There's several ways. It is a little complicated. I think it's important to name that, again, Black Mesa is a big region, so there are different people with different needs all across different regions. Like, I'm from Jettato District 7, and like I need support in certain ways building certain structures. So I might need lumber. There are elders that are in next to the coal mine who need windowsills and plumbing stuff to be able to like create a little funnel for their gray water system, et cetera. There's different ways that people can plug into support. And so there are some families that have like individual needs that need support. And then there's our camps as a whole. So we do have a GoFundMe for Black Mesa Resistance Camp. We also have a Facebook for Black Mesa Resistance Camp. We have the Black Mesa Solidarity Network on Instagram that folks can follow to be able to donate directly. Before Sheep Camp and Wood Camp, we will post the GoFundMe links and our Cash App links where people can make donations. We also will have started cleaning the wool that we shear and selling wool. So if there are people who are interested in buying raw wool or cleaned and processed wool, we are also selling wool. And then also, if you're like based locally, you can always show up to any of the political ed spaces and bring some donations, whether that's cash donations or food donations. I will say, because we live in a world currently where liberalism is at an all-time high, and we have a lot of people who are fundraising on behalf of communities where those funds are not going back to. We have a lot of grifters in community. We have a lot of people who have don't have the best practices when it comes to being financially responsible. I want to just like encourage people to do your homework and make sure that the people that you're giving money to actually have relationships with folks in community. For the Southwest region, specifically in Tiwa lands, I'm one of the point people who my elders look to be able to do fundraising, collecting donations. I'm very transparent. I'm always happy to send receipts. I've gotten really good at the whole documentation process. I'm no treasurer, don't get me wrong. I'm no accountant, but I am credible, and I do my best to show up for my people, and I'm always down to talk through things if we need to talk through things or receipts. But definitely just do your homework, make sure that the money is getting to the people that are doing the work on the ground. Um, and then if you would like to show up, you can get in contact with me on Instagram. I'm Hushke Siihasin Nazba. But I mostly go by Siihasin. You can find me as Siihasin on most platforms. And if you send me a DM, and if you send me like just your interest and why you're interested, or if you have resources and what resources you want to give, I I'm normally the person who's able to bridge those spaces and people. So that's what I would say is we do have a GoFundMe, we do have Cash Apps. Um, Cash is always the best option because anything that is transferred online is documented and can be used against us again. The revolution will not be 501c3 funded, and we know that we've learned from places like Stop Cop City that we are seeing the police in the state um, weave certain narratives that criminalize folks for gathering funds for things like legal support or mutual aid. So I want to name that it can be potentially really dangerous. So cash is always the best option. Um, but if you do have 501c3 status, that is also a great option because you have the protections of being a 501c3. But I just want to uplift that because a lot of people don't know that, yeah, financially we are being tracked, we are being surveilled, and historically in frontline spaces and resistance movements, we have seen money be used as a way to criminalize people. And so be very intentional about how you're giving money, when you're giving money. Here in Tiwa Lands, we also host a drag show right before Wood Camp, and folks can come out and give some dollars there and make donations then too. So there's plenty of opportunities between now till Thanksgiving week where folks can get involved and donate. And I hope that people will stay engaged and involved and come to some of the political ed that talks about the history of this land and people from Diné to Pueblo to Apache. We do a really in-depth political education about the history here and why people are inside the conditions that they are in. So just know that it's important. It doesn't matter where you are in your political education process, as long as you're like willing to learn and take steps forward. that's like the most valuable part of this work as a revolutionary. Like, we're always learning, we're always growing. There's always something new to learn and connect another struggle to. And so don't be intimidated. And just ask questions, like invite curiosity and try to like know that language is supposed to be used. It's not supposed to be static. Sometimes it takes on different ways of existing and being, you know, used. And
Mhm.
so really wanting to just uplift and encourage that it is intimidating. So have the courage.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. So for folks listening, we'll have all of that linked in the description. You can also I love to tell folks on the podcast, like, we're not just like talking at you, we want you to talk back. So comment on our Instagram if you're like, I don't know how to spell Siihasin on my Instagram. You can comment and we can get you in contact with them. So yeah, we will make sure that that's linked for everyone. Um, Thank you so, so much for being here. Is there anything else you wanna say for folks before we
Mm.
close out?
I think the only thing that I will say is I would leave with folks that this work is really, really important and it's really hard to do. And we need more people to do it. We need more people to learn. We need more people to come home. We need more people to study. We need more people to be revolutionaries. Like, you can apply revolutionary theory in any of the work that you do, whether your background is in science, whether your background is in mechanics. You could show up and be a mechanic block and help fix all of the revolutionaries' cars. And that
Yeah,
would be so helpful
yeah.
because mechanics are expensive.
Yeah, that is a financial donation.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. And it's there's so many ways that people can come to this work. So don't ever think that you don't have anything to give. We always have something that we can offer and give. And even if it's just showing up and being an extra pair of hands. Like, I really just want to encourage people that this revolution isn't going to build itself, and we got to build it, and we have to have strong morals, values, ethics, discipline in this work. And I hope that folks will join us because I know I'm tired and it's a lot. Like, I didn't really get to go in depth in this podcast interview about some of the things that those of us who are public facing experience, but like, I experienced things from like having to go to court, from being stalked by police to being shot at by the police to, having our homes or our places of meeting raided. We experience a lot of scary things
Mhm.
because we're always in public facing positions. And I'm very honored to be in that position, to be somebody who is known and trusted in community. But I also want to name, like, I could use some help. And I don't want to become a martyr. I don't want to become like the person, because we all need to be the person. There are no heroes. We've always saved ourselves, and we can't continue to go down this path of individualism and liberalism and putting all of our power in one person, and then the state just takes that person out. I really want people to join me in doing this work because we need more people doing it. And we really need to decolonize the way that we approach and come into movement spaces in a way that actually centers sustainability and collectivity and support, because um, it's scary to be like, I'm on the domestic terrorism watch list because of the land defense work that I do, and the amount of surveillance that I receive um just in daily life is ridiculous. They put up a camera outside of my house to surveil me. And it's and it's not just me. Other revolutionaries who I've been working with over the past 10 years here, who are powerhouses in this community, they also got cameras put outside their home. So like, we live in a police state, we live in a surveillance state, and I'm happy to take the punches. I'm just asking for people to help me and to show up. And you don't have to be public facing. You could help with folding the chairs.
Mhm,
You could
mhm.
help with facilitating the political ed reading group. Or you could help with just like getting resources to our unhoused relative to get them to mutual aid. Like, there are plenty of ways for people to plug in. We need help. We need the support, and forever solidarity forever. Like, I hope that people know, like, I'm just a person. We're all just people doing our best, and um join us.
Yeah, well said. Awesome. Well, thanks for listening to the Yapping with Yucca podcast. Yeah, thank
Hell
you
yeah.
so much,
Thank
Cecil, for
you.
being on.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.